Hello, I'm Dr. Robert Henry. I'm chair of the piano program at Kennesaw State University, and welcome to the 2020 Music Intensive. I have my covfefe here. Let's welcome Fred. And we have a beautiful Steinway instrument and a bunch of musical examples that we're going to go through. The title of this little discussion, informal discussion that we're going to have here, is Piano Playing Tips Every High Schooler Needs to Know. I work with a lot of high school students. And high school students, of course, eventually become incoming freshmen. So there's a whole range, an age range there I've had a lot of experience with. And I find myself, as a teacher, saying many of the same things to these students at this age range. By the time a high schooler, if they are continuing to play, they get into high school and they want to play more advanced repertoire. And they're finding they're running into some roadblocks here and there in their own training. Could be technical issues with their arm. Maybe their arm hurts. Maybe their hand hurts. Maybe they are having some issues with harmony, pedaling, how to practice, trills, embellishments, rhythm, scales, anything and everything. So I thought that in this little discussion that we have, I will address and touch on as many little topics as I can, planting seeds for you. And then hopefully you can just take and solve your own problems if I get you started on the right track. So let's go. Let me tell you the 6 parts that we're going to talk about. Number 1, part 1, posture, movement, and key bedding. Part 2, warm-ups and scales. Part 3, rhythm, harmony, pedaling, phrasing, and rubato. Part 4, voicing. Part 5, trills. Part 6, practicing. That's a lot. We're going to do this in one take. We'll see if we can get it done. Part 1, posture. How to sit at the piano. Now, high school, let's say you got a 15-year-old and they have forgotten that they grew. I see this all the time. You get somebody in high school and they still sit. Their bench or their chair is still where it was when they were 5 years old. So they're winding up playing like this. So don't forget to move your bench back, or your chair back. Now how far should it go back? Well, I would say first of all, sit on the edge of your bench or on your chair so that you are balanced basically on your sit bones, your butt, versus balanced on the back of your legs. You need to be sitting here. And then how far would mean that your elbows are able to move freely here, not bumping into yourself when you're crossing over. Also, this allows you, if you sit far back, it allows you to have flexibility moving around the instrument. If you play up here in the treble, you should lean over and have your body behind your arms and behind your hands as you're playing in your treble range. When you're moving into your bass range, you should be over here behind your hands over here. You're always behind whatever you're doing. Now, if you're playing expanded, obviously you're in the middle of all that. So that's your posture. Google this, Alexander technique. Alexander technique has been around for a long time. It's a philosophy of how to hold your body, how your body is allowed to just stack up on itself. And you know what? Bones don't get tired. Muscles get tired, but bones don't get tired. So Alexander technique is a philosophy of aligning the bones and letting the skeleton just stack up on itself, rather than the muscles holding it in place. You can find that balance point very easily on the piano. You're sitting on the edge of your bench. You're going to lean forward. You can feel how heavy you are here, how heavy your torso is. You lean back. You can feel that your abs are now engaged. And then let's just lean and try to find the point right in the middle where your body just balances there on its own. You don't need to work to hold it there. And then you do the same thing with your head. You lean forward, you feel how heavy your head is. You lean back, and then you find that balance point where your head just floats on top of your skeleton. That's good posture. Good posture is not poking your chest out. That's not what we're talking about. This is about keeping your body as loose and efficient as possible. You know, a tight muscle is slow. A tight muscle, a tired muscle, is not very powerful. a muscle that is loose and flexible and not continually engaged. That's a powerful muscle. That's how we play fast and loud, and that's how we play all these great, wonderful advanced pieces that we want to play. We got to make sure that we're not overworking in any way. So when I practice, I actually do incorporate sitting down at the piano as a part of my practice. So as I sit, I maintain that good posture. As I stand up, I maintain that good posture. It's part of it. Number two, let's talk about the posture of the hand. Is there a hand? Is there a hand position? Many people are taught that there is. I remember when I was a kid, I was taught to curve the fingers. Oh boy, curved fingers. Hold a ball in your hand. Hold a bird in your hand. Put your hand over your knee. All these different ways of curving our fingers. And then you come to find out that, your hand is naturally curved. And if you put your hand upside down, palm up, and you just look at it, well, it's already curved. And if you open it as hard as you can, and then you relax it, guess what? It's going to come back to a curved position. So the hand likes to be curved anyway. So why are we forcing it into a position that it's already in? No reason to do that. If you stand up and you let your hand just relax by your side, guess what? It's curved. You don't need to force it that way. So we're going to sit down with our good posture. We're going to have our hand naturally, powerfully, already curved, already with the arch, and just put our hand where we want to play, and then we begin to play. It's that simple. And this, you can just stop it right here. I mean, so many pianists need to go back and redo their entire training just based on what I've said so far in 5 minutes. Getting rid of all this tension that we have with curved hand positions. So if you just have your hand naturally relaxed, it will already be curved. Going on to what I'm going to call the 8 movements, the 8 directions of movement that we have in piano playing. They're in pairs. Okay, so first of all, we have up and down, in and out, rotation, like this, and then swiveling. So swiveling looks like this. So we can move our hand like that. All right. So let's take each one. Let's say I play just a drop right here. That's obviously a down, and then I can lift out of that with a lift. All right. And then I have in and out. So if I'm here playing on the white keys, I might be kind of out. If I'm playing on the black keys, I'm moving in. So there's my in and out. Now what if I combine the in and out and the up and down? In, for instance, like up and forward, for instance, like this. Let's all try to incorporate more lifting into our playing. So many pianists, so many kids come to me and say, hey, I can't play this, my arm gets tired, I can't play Chopin Etude No. 1, I can't play the Tchaikovsky Trill, I can't play. And it's because they're forgetting to move in all these basic ways. So up and down, in and out, and then rotation. Let's take the opening of the Pathétique, for instance. There's rotation. The black key Etude, there's rotation. All those notes, ya da da dee 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 dee, that's all rotation. Trills are rotation. All right? La Campanella. That's lots of rotation in there. And then swiveling. So swiveling is when, I'm going to bring the camera over here so you can see. Swiveling, it allows our arm to stay behind the hand. So if I'm going to play this pattern, watch this. All right? So when I play the thumb, my arm is behind the thumb. And as I move toward the 5th finger, see, I have swiveled over here, and now my arm is behind the 5th finger. My body is aligned. My body is supportive of whatever finger I'm playing. Now, I'm not going to do this. This would be wrong. Like this. Watch this. See that tension in my wrist right there? So what I'm going to do, look at that. Just that. You can see all my skeleton, and then I just relax over here, and it disappears. See how loose my hand is? This is what Liszt calls the quiet hand. That's quiet. So what Godofsky calls the dead hand. My hand is dead. And I play, and I'm not reaching over here to this other position. I'm allowing my hand, if I play the thumb, there's no reason to reach over here to the octave yet. I'm not playing that note yet. And as I move over here, I'm not going to reach for the thumb. I'm not playing that note anymore. So I'm going to let my thumb allow my hand to expand and contract. I like to think about a jellyfish as it swims, kind of opening and closing and opening and closing. So that's swivel business. So think about those 8 directions when you're playing any of your pieces. And I have found in my own playing, if I'm having some difficulty in a certain passage, it's probably because I'm forgetting to do one of those 8 directions of movement. And lastly, in part 1, key bedding. Key bedding. This is the key, yeah. And then we have the bottom of the key, that's called the key bed. Key bedding is a bad thing. Should we play to the bottom of the key? Should we arrive at the bottom of the key? Sure. When you're a baseball player and you swing the bat, you go ahead and swing all the way around. But you hit the ball halfway through. The rest of it is a follow through. So yeah, when we play to the bottom of the key, we play and we follow through all the way to the bottom. Here's what people do though. They play on the bottom of the key and then they push and grind and squeeze on the bottom of the key. And what that does, it makes all the muscles back here scream. And it doesn't get any louder. It doesn't change the sound. It's just, I might as well just sit here and push against that. It doesn't do anything except hurt my body. So if I'm going to play something, I'm going to be as loose as I can possibly be after that note. I don't care whether it's a loud note, a soft note, a long note, or a short note. We have to practice instantly letting go of the effort that it took to create that note. If you think about a violinist who must continually press on the string and then continually move the bow and have that tension, there's a lot of tension involved in that. The entire length of the sound, it takes tension to generate that. It takes effort and movement. On the piano playing, it's not that way at all. You play, and then you can just let your arm weight hold that note down. There's no reason to engage muscles to do that. So let's not key bed. So everything I just mentioned, the posture, the hand not being curved, except in the sense that it's already curved, these 8 directions, and also playing light on your feet, key bedding wise, these 4 ideas that would really address most of the technical issues that you would face in your playing. So if you're having a problem, review that section. Part 2, let's go on to warm-ups and scales. Warm-ups and scales. Scales, I think, should be a part of everybody's daily habit. When I got serious about music at 23, I practiced an hour of scales every day. And I made that commitment to myself to do that. And I didn't skip for many, many years. And I finally got to the point where I didn't really need to do scales for an hour a day anymore. But I think there are many, many reasons to play scales. And number 1 is that self-discipline aspect. Making a promise to yourself that, you know what, I'm a pianist. This is my instrument. I'm going to connect and maintain my relationship with that instrument every single day with scales, with some technical work. If you think about any sport, let's say basketball, if you take that sport apart, well, guess what? There's offense and defense, and then there are many components to offense. I mean, you've got layups on the right, you got layups going down the middle, you got layups going to the left, then you got all kinds of passing. You got chest passing, bounce passing, over the head pass, behind the back passing. You've got free throws, you've got 3-pointers from this angle, all these different things. Then you have to do all that stuff while you're being guarded. And so there's so many different drills, and a good coach will take the game apart, and they will practice each aspect of that game separately, and they will polish that aspect with those players. And then, only then, do they, at the end of the practice, they say, okay, let's go and play a game now. And that's how we should practice as well. If you want to play, let's say you want to play a Beethoven concerto, or Beethoven sonata, or Chopin ballade, or something like that, guess what? That piece is filled with scales, arpeggios, broken chords, double thirds, chromatic thirds, octaves, all these different things. And if we want to be able to just swallow that piece whole and learn it quickly, we need to work on those components separately. So we work on our scales separately, we work on our arpeggios separately, double thirds, chromatic scales, broken chords, octaves, leaps, certain things like that. We work on that, then we incorporate that into our piece. That's the most efficient way to do it. I own, just because I'm a teacher and this is my profession, I own every exercise book there is. I've looked through them all, I've played through them all. You know what I do? I practice my scales. The only thing I've really ever done is practice scales and Chopin etudes and some Hanon here and there. That's been the extent of my technical training, and I've been able to play anything I wanted to do. I think the thing is people skip the scale work, and that's a big mistake. And then they wonder why they can't play. When I got serious about playing, there was one quote that really changed my life, or several, I guess, but with regard to scales. Joseph Levine, during the first 5 years of any Russian conservatory, the student works on scales and arpeggios. First 5 years. And here's the quote, here's the part that got me. Any student that attempted to play all these complicated pieces without practicing their scales would be laughed at in Russia. Would be laughed at. And I read that and I was like, I don't want to be laughed at. I don't want to be a fool. Because that's foolish, I think, to just jump right into your pieces without working on your technique. So that's, scales they teach you the patterns, they teach you the concept of tonality, they teach you the fingering patterns, they teach you the sharps and the flats of every key. They teach you stamina, they teach you how to play with a steady tempo. They teach you how to line up one hand with the other and play synchronized with your hands. There's so many different things that scales do for you. And every composer writes scales into their music and all these different things. So if you don't, just look at any Beethoven sonata. It's filled with these things: scales, arpeggios, broken chords. You want to play the Moonlight Sonata? You better play your broken chords, because look, that's all broken chords. You want to play the Fourth Chopin Ballade? Well, has that section in the end of it that has a lot of chromatic scales in it, double third scales. Sorry. So, and all these little arpeggios in the left hand. You've got to work on these things separately. Don't skip these steps. Part 3, rhythm. I know this seems very obvious, but count. Count. Let's say you have a piece that's in 4/4 time. I know this is, just bear with me for a second now. You should always be counting 1, 2, 3, 4. I know that's mind-blowing, but you should never stop counting. Let's say you had a measure of quarter notes and then you have a measure of a whole note. So you would, here's what I see a lot of students do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And they'll stop counting. They stop counting when they get to the whole note. Now, every time they get to a long note, they stop counting. When, in fact, during the long note, that's when you must count. That's the most crucial note to count on. Because any moron can count the quarter notes. It takes skill to count during a long note. And also the same thing with rests. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The beat goes on. You must continue to organize time. Counting is organizing time. And any professional that you see who is making money as a living, they are counting all the time. Every musician up on stage, every orchestra member is counting. Every conductor is counting. If they're not counting, they're not in the orchestra. So in pianists, we can get away with a lot of stuff because we generally play just by ourselves. We don't play in an ensemble growing up. So if you're a flute player, let's say you're in your band, your counting is just part of the culture of it. And sometimes piano is not really part of the culture. We don't really start playing chamber music until a little later. So students learn to just kind of play and not really take charge of their own counting. And there's no consequences because we're not playing with other people. There's no consequences if we're not counting. So we're not really out of sync with anybody else. We don't see that there's a really detrimental effect if we're not counting. So count. Number 2 is counting and subdividing. So not only are we going to count the 1, 2, 3, 4, but we can subdivide those beats. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And we can subdivide them in triplets. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and we can subdivide them with 16ths. 1E and 2E and 3E and 4E and whatever the situation calls for. We're going to organize those beats in such a way that they are equidistant apart. That's what subdividing does. And subdividing is not some kiddie technique. This is what professionals do. This is what makes professionals professionals, because they continue to do the things that make good music, and subdividing makes good music. So we must subdivide. And let's say you're playing the opening of the Pathetique Sonata. Okay, so on the page it's just written as a quarter note. So we could just go 1 and then just start playing, but that's not really musical. I'm going to organize it minimum like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. But see, those beats are so far apart, how am I going to know exactly when to play, when to say 2? Listen to that. 1, 2. If I don't subdivide, I'm kind of guessing where to say 2. So watch what subdividing does. I'm going to go 1, E, and 2, and 1, E, and 2, E, and 3, E, and 4, E, and 1, E. See what I mean? So subdividing helps us organize long spans of time. So we're going to work on that. We're going to do that during the rests and during the long notes. That's where the skill of subdividing really reveals itself, and it also reveals itself if you don't have that skill. Anybody can hear it if you don't do it well. So that's rhythm. Another thing I want to talk about is 2 against 3. Now when you get into advanced repertoire, you're dealing with these cross rhythms. So what that might look like, you might have a 3-pattern triplet here in the left hand, 1, 2, 3, and you have a duple pattern in your right hand. So how can we work on that? First of all, if the triplet's in the left hand, we're going to say together, left, right, left, together, left, right, left, together, left, right, left, together, left, right, left, and then you can speed it up. Okay, and that should be something that you develop. Then you can reverse that. You put triplets in the right hand. 1, 2, 3, 1, and then you got duplets in the left hand. And what you would say here is together, right, left, right, together, right, left, right, together, right, left, right, together, right, left, right, and then you can speed it up. You can put your legs in with it, whatever, and practice that with different metronome speeds. But 2 against 3, there are many different types of cross rhythms. There's 3 against 4, 3 against 5, 4 against 5. And this is found in Chopin's music a lot, where you'll have just free running scales over a 4 pattern in the left hand. And how do we count those kinds of things? Well, if it's like a 35 over a 4, you just make sure you start together, you play your hands evenly, and then you end together. It's the starting and ending notes that are the most important when you have really crazy cross rhythms going on. So anyway, let's move on to, we're still in part 3 now. We're talking about rhythm. Now let's talk about harmony. Harmony. What is harmony? Harmony is 2 or more notes. 2 or more notes and what that means. If I play this, that's harmony. So first of all, I'm aware of what interval that is. That's a third. If I play this, I'm aware that's a fourth. I'm always aware of what interval I'm playing. That's number 1. I'm also aware of what chord I'm playing. There are only 4 types of chords: major, minor, diminished, and augmented. And there are just variations of those are the 4 basic types of chords. So, and these are all stacked thirds, like the major chord. Everybody knows a major chord, everybody knows a minor chord. The diminished chord, diminished means small, means make small. So what we're doing here is we're making the thirds as small as they go. C up to E flat is a minor third. And then E flat up to G flat is a minor third. So we're stacking small intervals on top of each other, and that makes a diminished chord. Augment means make bigger. So I'm going to stack major thirds now. So C up to E is a major third. E up to G sharp is another major third. Together, that's an augmented chord. Okay? So those are the 4 types of chords. I'm always aware of what chord I'm playing. If you are thinking about a chord chart, for instance, here is Imagine by John Lennon. Look at the top. It says C. And then the next measure it says F. And then the next measure it says C and F and C and F and C and F. Just like an American report card. So if we have all those chords that go back and forth, let's think about it. Here's C, and then the next measure is going to be F. It's very easy. I just play a C triad and then an F triad. I can play that in the left hand. Play both hands at the same time. Now, we've all heard Imagine, and we know that John Lennon does this. So what he's doing here is he's taking a C chord, and he's just oscillating it like that. And he's taking his left hand and just pretending like a bass player. C and F. Okay, so no pedal. Showing you, and then F, and it's just back and forth like that. That's how you read chord charts. Now, when you play a classical piece of music, it doesn't tell you what the chord is. No classical piece. I mean, Bach, when he wrote this piece, that's the Prelude number 1 in C from the Well-Tempered Clavier. When he wrote that piece, he did not at the top say, this is C major. But we should do that. We should take our pencil and write in on the first measure, hey, this measure is C major. Why is it C major? Because a C major chord has C, E, and G in it. And the first measure of Bach's piece is all C's, E's, and G's. All right, so all 16 notes of the first measure are C. That's it, C major. And here's where harmony helps you. It helps you learn faster, it helps you memorize. Because take the first measure of Bach. You got 16 notes right there. 16 notes versus 1 chord. See, it's easier to memorize 1 chord than it is 16 different things. You know how many notes there are in the first prelude? I counted it up once. There are 546 notes in Bach's C major prelude. And there are only about 35 or so, 36 measures. So it's much easier to memorize 36 chords than it is 546 abstract notes that don't have any relationship with each other. See, I want to organize all those notes as best I can into smaller chunks. And so when I'm playing that piece, I'm thinking per bar, I'm thinking, okay, measure 1 is a C major chord. Measure 2 is a D minor 7 chord. Measure 3 is a G7 chord. Measure 4 is a C major chord again. So that's what's going through my head when I'm on stage in real time. That's what I'm thinking about. This is not something that I'm writing in the music and then never thinking about again just to make my teacher happy. This is something that I use. And this is how we sight read quickly. If we can instantly see, okay, that's a C major, you're going to basically play C major at that point, and you know what to omit and you know what to play. If I say C major, what should instantly pop in your head? C, E, G. And that tells you exactly which notes to play, C, E, G, but it also tells you which notes not to play. You're not going to play any of these other ones. If I say, what's G major? Hopefully you said G, B, D. And you would only play G, B, D. You wouldn't play any of the other notes because they don't match that chord. So this is a crucial process in learning a piece of music, is identifying the chords. Then, now let's say that we had a C major chord here. And then over here we have a G major chord. What we want to do is start to create relationships between those two chords. Okay, so this is what it means to be in a certain key. And I ask high school students, hey, they'll come to play for me. I say, okay, what key is that piece in? And they'll hem and haw, and they don't know what key. They've been playing the piece, they've been studying it for 3 months. It says at the top of the page sometimes, sonata in E flat or something. But they won't know what key the piece is in. This is a big problem. And so the solution is to start thinking about what key that you're in at all times. When I'm on stage, I am aware that I'm playing the piano. I'm aware that I'm Robert Henry. I'm aware that I'm in the hall that I'm playing on. I'm aware that, I'm 46 years old. There are certain things that I don't have to remind myself about. And so when I'm on stage, I'm not thinking, what instrument am I playing? Oh yeah, I'm playing the piano. I'm aware of that. And it's the same thing with key. When I'm playing a piece of music, I'm not just saying, what chord is this? Oh, I have no idea. What key is this piece in? Oh yeah, it's this key. That never drifts away from my mind. It is always actually first and foremost, because it informs everything that I do, what key I'm in. It informs me of what notes to play. It informs me of all the relationships in the piece of music. It tells me what the most important chords are. It tells me where home base is, so to speak. Like if a piece is in the key of E flat, well, E flat is home base. And then all the other chords are going to relate to E flat in a certain way. And that's when we get into Roman numerals. Maybe you've seen Roman numerals written in music before, like a Roman numeral 1. And let's say you're in the key of C. Well, C major's 1. What would G be? Let's see, you got C, D, E, F, G. That's 5 notes away. And then if you create that's called the 5th, of course. And if you make a 5 chord, you're playing G, B, D. That creates a 5 chord. So then I can go a 1 and a 5, 1. I can create chords off that. A 1 chord, and a 5 chord, and back to a 1 chord. So what I've done there is I've created a hierarchy. I've said that C is more important. C is the place of rest. The G chord that I go to is a very interesting chord, but it's not where I want to end the piece. I'm going to return to C. And so when you're playing sonatas and things like that, the concept of key is super important. The idea of tonic and dominant key relationships, and the fact that we start usually in the home key, we depart from it, and then we return to it. This is what makes music satisfying, and this is something that that gets more and more developed as you practice and as you age. You'll understand harmony better and better, and the concept of the circle of fifths will materialize in your mind more and more every day that you're thinking about harmony. So you can read simple chord charts to get started with this. One wonderful place I think to work on chords is hymns. So here's a book, 50 Hymn Tunes Without Words for Sight Reading. I like a lot. What it does, first of all, it has hymn tunes, and these are hymns that have been around for hundreds of years for churches. And it takes just the soprano and the bass, and you practice the soprano and bass by themselves. Then you turn the page, and it does that same hymn in 4-part harmony. So you learn how to play hymns. And every piece is basically a hymn, if you reduce it down. So the first measure of the Bach prelude, even though there are 16 notes in there, well, guess what? That's just simply this. So that's a single chord. The next measure, that's simply a chord. So, and then if you get to the point where you can read hymns, then you'll understand that, hey, my pieces, even though they sound complicated, they're basically, I can reduce them down to something as simple as a hymn. Hymns are tricky when you first start because the chords are coming at you very quickly. I've had students who can play La Campanella. I've had best in state students who won the state competition, and you put a hymn in front of them and they break down into tears. Not really, but they can't do it, and it takes great effort for them to be able to do that, and eventually they can. The thing to do, though, everybody, is don't skip this stuff. Don't skip your scales. Don't skip harmony. Don't skip learning about what key you're in. Don't skip analyzing your pieces. Don't skip counting. All this stuff that we skip, that's taking the easy way out, and you're not getting any better by skipping. You don't get any better at something by ignoring all your weak spots. You get better by looking your weak spot directly in the face and addressing it and working on it until it becomes an asset rather than a detriment or a liability. So moving on. So we're going to think about the chord charts when we're playing. We're going to think about what key we're in. We're going to start thinking about, okay, this is a C major chord, and then when we go to Roman numerals, we're talking about the relationships between that chord and the other chord. So there's a lot in harmony, and harmony is a lifelong study, and you hopefully keep getting better with that. Going on to pedaling. Just a couple quick tips about pedaling. When you play your pedal, you got your foot down. Make sure you lift your foot all the way up. If you lift it up to about 80%, you can see that there's still sound there. You must lift it all the way up so that there's no sound. I think a lot of times we get comments from our judges or teachers about sloppy pedaling, and you're pedaling in the right spot, but you're not lifting your foot all the way up. So that's number one. Number two is when to pedal. Some composers tell us when to pedal. Chopin writes in his music often, he'll write pedal, and then he'll write the asterisk to tell us to lift the pedals. Some composers don't do that. Debussy famously does not write pedals. Debussy famously does not write fingerings. He wants us to figure this stuff out for ourselves. So in these cases, and really in every case, we pedal based on the harmony. We pedal based on the harmony, and we change the pedal when the harmony changes. Here's a chord progression. Okay. Now, if I were going to pedal that correctly, I would pedal, and then as I play this next chord, I lift my foot. Okay, so I change per harmony. I would not do this. All in one pedal. And so that's an important concept. And so a lot of times students are wondering, when do I change the pedal? You change the pedal when the harmony changes. And if you don't know harmony, how do you know when the harmony changes? See, you gotcha. So you have to know your harmony, because harmony will help you pedal better, as well as a lot of other things. And then the other thing too, we have accompaniment in our pieces often, and we pedal according to the bass. Let's say we're playing the first Chopin, or the second Chopin Nocturne, that one. So in this case, we're pedaling per the bass note. Bass, 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 and so forth. We're pedaling according to the basses. All right. Phrasing. Every phrase, okay, it's hard to say every phrase, but pretty much every phrase has a certain destination inside of it. Most phrases are 4 bars long. Usually about the third bar is where the phrase is headed towards, and then it relaxes after that. So the job of music is to create tension and then to relax out from it. So, and music at its very basic is just simply tension and release. Tension and release. So I can take a 2-note phrase. Like this. There's music, not physically, my arm is completely loose. But there's great musical tension in that note, and then there's a relaxation out of it. And what if I did a chord with that? Then we relax from that. You see? Stress and release. What if I did more notes? this idea? What about 4 notes? What about 5 notes? You see? So it doesn't matter how many notes you have in a phrase. There's always an idea of tension and release. What if you had a release building up to tension and then back to release? Like and building up to the tense moment and then back down to this. So it doesn't matter how complicated your piece is, it can basically be reduced down to that dichotomy, those two, the tension and the release points. You're playing the Debussy Reverie. So we lead to this point and then we come back. And then we relax away from it. So this is how we start to develop our phrasing and make it the most natural it can be. And then the concept of rubato. Rubato is new once you get, I think, to the advanced repertoire. And it requires that you have some flexibility with your timing. So yeah, we practice with the metronome. We don't always make music with the metronome. You got to have some sophistication in your counting and in your rhythm to be able to successfully pull off a good rubato. Rubato is the concept of music that music can push forward and then it can relax. Just like chords do, just like phrases do, the music can move forward and then it can relax. So if I play like the Debussy Clear Lune, because at the second page he actually says tempo rubato, which means, hey, have some flexibility in the timing. If you played it with rubato, you might go faster into this next phrase. And then move forward. Okay, verse is just playing it straight. Not bad, but he wants you to move forward or have some kind of flexibility. There's more emotion in the movement, and that's what composers will write in there. That's what it means to have tempo rubato. Voicing. We can voice within a single chord, within a single hand. Let's say I play this chord progression. Okay, now I could play all the notes the same volume and it would sound kind of flat. Here's everything at the same volume. Or I could bring out the top note a little bit more. So I'm going to bring out my thumb now. Watch. And what that does, I think it directs the listener to exactly which note that we want them to hear. And if I did those same chords in 2 hands, I would bring out my pinky in my right hand now. Here's flat, here's no voicing. Now here's voicing of the pinky. And I think voicing is one of the easiest ways to go from an amateur sound to a professional sound. It does take some work to voice. It takes some thought about how to touch the piano, and I invite you to work with your teacher on that. But if you want to have this polished playing, I see it all the time. Pianists they play very well, and all it needs is just that final touch of voicing, and they would sound like $1,000,000. So really work on your voicing. And it's important to make sure your voicing is consistent. You can't just voice kinda. You can't voice 75% of your notes or 90% of your chords. They all have to be voiced. Here's a famous example from the 3rd scherzo. You got these chords. All right? Now those were voiced. what I'm doing is I'm bringing out the melody. Listen to it again. And you can hear the melody that I'm showing you. Listen to it unvoiced. I played everything the same. And that's not really fair to the listener. That's very tiring for the listener because they don't know where the melody is. So I'm going to bring out that top voice. And sometimes voicing is not a matter about bringing out the voice, it's about keeping the other voices quiet. So these other voices, I'm hardly playing at all. That's how soft everything else was. And then, you see? So we can voice within a single hand, but then we should also voice with the right hand versus the left hand. Usually the right hand is the melody. The left hand needs to be quiet. Let's take this famous Chopin Nocturne again. Okay, so we have a bass, and then we have these chords in the middle, and then we have the melody. So it's really three parts. Bass, and these chords I'm going to keep very quiet. I'm still going to voice them. I'm going to bring up the E flat G. Then my melody floats on top of all that. So we have to learn to voice not only within one hand itself, but also with all the textures, all the melodies, all the harmonies that we're creating. Okay, trills. Trills. We find trills in every style of music. And I'm going to specifically talk about Baroque trills and classical trills. First of all, there are two types of trills. There are measured and unmeasured. Measured means I'm really trying to be very rhythmic with my trill. For instance, like this. So I'm really subdividing the trill. Okay, unmeasured would be this, where I just let my fingers do whatever I want to do. Okay, that's unmeasured. Now let's talk about the measured trills, because when we play Baroque music, when we play classical period music, we often, most of the time, need to decide exactly how many notes we're going to play per embellishment, per trill. So now it's up to us as performers how many notes we want to do. But it shouldn't be where your hand is just kind of twitching and playing how many of our notes come out. If we want to play 5 notes, let's say you're playing the Italian concerto, you know, this piece. Okay, you get to the middle section, or the first place where the concertino comes in. Now here comes a trill. Okay, now I'm consistently bringing out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can call that a 5-note trill, or you can call it 4 notes plus the termination. But either way, I'm not going and just whatever comes out comes out. I'm being very articulate about da 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 da. I want 5 notes. So how do we work on that kind of thing? Well, I would say reduce it down to a single note trill. Let's take this C and D. A single note trill is just 1 note. Anybody can do that. Fred could do that. But then you've got, how about 2 notes? 3 notes. And you could, first of all, you can make an exercise out of this so far. Whatever. Making sure you're playing 3 notes, and only 3 notes. Don't let your hand get away with playing accidentally 4 or accidentally only 2 or whatever. Play 3, because you're in charge of your hand. And then play 4. So you start, in this case, you start on the D. And then you can harmonize that. Okay, and then 5 notes. then 6 notes and so on. So you make up your own exercises, but in every case, you're telling your fingers exactly how many notes to play on your trill. And this is just on the white keys. Then you also have trills that are a white and a black, or then a black and a white, which are half steps apart. And then you have to work on your whole steps, black key whole steps. Then you have to work on your black key whole steps that way, and then your black key, white key to black key that way. So you should work on every spacing, in other words, and every angle of your trills as well. And that's just with one pair of fingers. You should do trills with other fingers too. 1 and 3, 2 and 4 is common. I personally use 3 and 5 a lot. I hardly meet anybody who can use 3 and 5, but for some reason, 3 and 5 work well for me. And but this is how you work on your trill. Don't let your fingers just do whatever they want to do and twitch out some random number of notes. You'll be happier if you go through this process versus being scared of ornamentation in your Bach and in your Mozart and whatever. And I'll also say this: when you're working on Bach, when you're working on Mozart, whatever, students, look, I do all the same stuff. We want the end result now. we want to get to the fun stuff now. Ornaments are fun. We want it to sound like the finished product today. So what students will do is they get upset. They see all these trills written in the music and they want to play the trills now. Trills and ornaments should be the last thing that you put into your piece. They should be worked on, like we talked about with the basketball. They should be worked on separately. And you should be able to play the piece straight through, seamlessly, effortlessly, with no ornaments whatsoever. First, before you think about starting to put ornaments in the piece. Okay? Because time after time, I see students playing they play basically from ornament to ornament. They play very beautifully. They get to the first ornament and it sounds awful. They stop. They have a mistake or whatever, and then they pick themselves up and then they play until they have the next ornament. So they basically play from mistake to mistake to mistake, versus really learning the piece conceptually as a whole and then going back and putting in ornaments as you can. And they don't have to be complicated ornaments. So many students are convinced that the more ornaments, the more notes in their ornament, the better. That's not the case at all. So just start with simple ornaments that are rhythmically clear and secure, and that your hand is not all tense on. Okay? And this is another reason, by the way, don't curve your fingers, because your hands are already tense. It makes ornaments really tough. Your hand needs to be just completely relaxed, and then you just move your fingers and just with tiny sparks of energy, as Godofsky says, and allow your hand to return to the relaxed state instantly. That's a quote from Godofsky. All right, finally, practicing. Now, I do a whole lecture on practicing. I could talk about practicing a long time, but I want to just very quickly give you a hint. When you practice in small sections. Your short-term memory is 10 to 15 seconds long. That's the sweet spot. It doesn't matter how smart you are. That's what your short-term memory is. With a degree of specificity, that's how long your short-term memory is. Now, for instance, you know approximately what I said about 15, 20 seconds ago, but you don't know exactly what I said verbatim, because that's disappeared from your immediate memory. So when we are practicing, we want to practice in windows of 10 seconds or so. Okay? So if you're playing something, think about it. You can't get very far in a piece. Take one of your pieces and get your phone out and put it on the stopwatch and play. And when it gets to 10 seconds, stop and see how long you were able to play. It's not very long. It's a few bars, maybe 4 bars. And where I see students, they'll play the entire pages and they'll just repeat those entire sections over and over. And they're wasting a lot of time. So nowadays I practice less and get more accomplished because I know how better to practice than when I was younger. So I practice in small sections. And I make sure that I repeat something over and over, and I approach that challenge in that piece from a lot of different angles. So if I have a passage of running 16ths, I'm going to play that staccato. I'm going to play, I might make some rhythmic variations. I can first of all do triplets. Then I could dot it with 16ths. Then you can reverse the dot like a Scottish snap. So bum 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 bum. That's a triplet. Or 16ths. Okay, so those are some basic ways of breaking that up. But what I'm going to do is play that each way that I vary it. I'm going to play it at least 4 times. I might play it up to 8 times. Like I might do something 8 times the same way, and then I change it up and do that 8 times. And I change it up and do that 8 times. So I might play it loud 8 times, and then I play it softly 8 times, and then staccato 8 times, and blah blah blah. So I'm not just playing 100 times the same way. I'm varying it, and by varying it, first of all, I'm giving myself a lot more variety in the way that I can play the piano. I'm practicing all kinds of ways, even though I'm playing only one piece. But I'm drilling that passage in different ways too. So I'm playing the same thing, but I'm keeping my brain engaged, keeping it interested throughout the entire session. And it's very tiring to practice this way. It's mentally tiring, but you get a lot more accomplished. You'll be done faster, you know. So when I practice like this, I can do an hour or 2 at a time. I need a break, and that's it. It might be the whole day, but I've accomplished more than if I just play the piece over and over and over, kind of in a lazy way, for 8 hours. Start practicing more efficiently and more systematically. Also, cycle through your pieces every few minutes. Cycle through your passages every few minutes. Don't work on the same passage for an hour. Work on that passage for 5 or 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever. Put it away. Do something else. Take a break. Come back to that passage later on in the same day. Google this term, spaced repetition. I'm sure we've all used flashcards. The spaced repetition is based on the concept of flashcards. What do flashcards do? I'm in the process of teaching my son, who's 7, his multiplication table. So we do flashcards, okay? We cycle through, and eventually something that he answered will come back. And it will be faster the second time, and then it might come back again. And by the 4th or 5th time of seeing it, he's getting it the first time. And this is how we should practice also. We play something, we get it as good as we can get it. We have to realize when we reach that saturation point, when we're just beating our head against the wall. Okay, so you get it as good as you can get it within that 5 or 10 minutes. You cycle through another piece. You practice Bach for 10 minutes, then you go on to Mozart, then you practice your Chopin, then you practice Rachmaninoff, whatever. But you're going to cycle through your pieces all throughout your practice session. If you have an hour, you should be playing the same passages several times in that hour. Not just in one block of this, and now you're going to do one block of this, or even worse, you know, Bach on Tuesday. It shouldn't be like that. If you have 4 pieces that you're working on, you should practice all 4 every day. Because if you don't maintain your pieces, guess what? They tend to drift away. There's something called the forgetting curve. The forgetting curve. And science says that if you repeat something over and over for 30 days straight, you will retain 90% of that. If you only hear or test or drill something once in 30 days, science says you will forget 90% of it. So we must repeat the same practice session, I think, every day until it's part of your permanent memory. That's how you really practice more efficiently. Practice using your metronome. That's a great way. And learn how to slow practice. People don't like slow practice because it makes their skin crawl. When I practice slowly, I hate it. I hate doing it. But what I've learned to do is I also kind of love it because I know it's making me better. I can the events are happening so far apart, boom, boom, that I can mentally get in between those 2 notes and do a lot of thinking. See, slow practice is not really slow. It's physically slow, and the notes are going by slowly, but my mind is engaged in real time. It's like the first Spider-Man or something, when the guy threw a punch at him, and he just kind of looked at the guy's fist because Spider-Man was so fast. I mean, you can see the music faster when you practice slowly. You can see what's happening, and you can get in there and kind of tinker with what you're thinking about when you play that passage, and you can solve a lot of problems with your mind. This is what Liszt said. Liszt said, think 10 times and play once. So if you're playing and your notes are very far apart, if your notes are like a second apart, you can get in there and fix a lot of stuff. And I have found, the more I teach and the more I play, that most problems are the way we're thinking about them. They're not going to be solved by just the 501st repetition of this passage. You can solve a lot of things just by thinking about them differently. So those are some thoughts about practicing. There's a lot more I could say about every single thing. Hopefully you got something out of this. And feel free to contact me at any time. Text me, email me. I'll be happy to coach you via the internet or in person. And we can solve problems together. And if you would like to audition for Kennesaw State University, the piano program, you can also text me and email me, and anytime we can set up something. Even if you're just sending me videos of your playing, that's often enough for an audition. So I look forward to meeting you at some point and seeing what your progress is. If you have any comments or any questions, feel free to contact me.